Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Prime News. I do apologize for not being on camera today. For some reason, when I went to turn on my camera like 3 different times today, it just wouldn't turn on. But you know what? That's not going to stop us from getting out an episode of Prime News because we have a lot of great news to talk about. And the first story today is actually about the Nindies showcase that happened at 11 a.m. Central earlier today. That's about 4 hours or so ago at the time of recording. And I gotta say, the indie games coming to Switch looked very, very solid. I'm gonna pick out 3 of them I actually want to highlight and show off to you guys. So here are the 3 games that I thought looked very, very good from that showcase.
What is that thing? It seems to react to the boy's presence. The boy should be cautious.
So just to recap, that was Mark of the Ninja Remastered, Lightfall, and, well, yeah, a quick glance at the full lineup. Because I guess there was only 2 games that I really got excited about. There are some others that looked interesting, but those 2 really stood out for me. That being said, I am excited about the indie games on Switch. I've always enjoyed what's coming for the indie games on Switch. In fact, to also talk a little bit more about the indie games, Nintendo gave us the 10 best-selling indie games. And they didn't really tell us which one was number 1. It was in no particular order. But I wanted to give you the top 10 best-selling indie games to date, just to give you an idea of the types of indie games that are doing best on the system. And those games are SteamWorld Dig 2, Stardew Valley, Kamiko, Celeste, Fast RMX, Golf Story, Enter the Gungeon, Overcooked Special Edition, NBA Playgrounds, and Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. So very interesting stuff. And yeah, I owned some of those games. So I guess I'm part of the family of buying some of the best-selling indie games on the platform. Anyways, moving on to our second story today. This isn't directly Nintendo-related. However, it does have an impact on Nintendo, at least in terms of maintaining current support, because Ubisoft has fended off Vivendi, who has reached a deal to remove them from being a shareholder. Again, this is extremely important because Vivendi was looking to overtake, as in buy out Ubisoft. And Vivendi, in the past, when they have bought out video game companies, they have done it. And when they have done it, they have basically eliminated all new IP creation and have focused exclusively on the franchises that sell best and beating them into the ground and releasing them on platforms that they believe are worthwhile. To give you an idea, if Vivendi had bought out Ubisoft, I guarantee you there would never be another Ubisoft game on a Nintendo platform as long as they were in control. So this is actually very positive news for us Nintendo owners, and I wanted to go over the remarks that were given out to announce that Ubisoft has done something about this. So in Paris, March 20th, 2018, today Ubisoft announced that it has signed an agreement with Vivendi for its full exit from Ubisoft's share capital with the sale of all of Vivendi's 30,489,300 shares. The transaction includes an investment by 2 new long-term investors, the relationship investing arm of Ontario Teachers' Public Equities Division, and Tencent, a share buyback by Ubisoft, an acquisition of shares by Guillemot Brothers SE, and accelerated book building with institutional investors. Following the implementation of the transaction, Vivendi will no longer hold any shares in Ubisoft and has committed to not acquire any shares in Ubisoft for at least 5 years. As part of the transaction, Ubisoft and Tencent also have announced today a strategic partnership that will significantly accelerate the reach of Ubisoft franchises in China in the coming years. Yves Guillemot, CEO and co-founder, said the evolution in our shareholding is great news for Ubisoft. It was made possible thanks to the outstanding execution of our strategy and the decisive support of Ubisoft talents, players, and shareholders. I would like to warmly thank them all. The investment from new long-term shareholders in Ubisoft demonstrates their trust in our future value creation potential. And Ubisoft's share buyback will be executive to all shareholders. Finally, the new strategic partnership agreement we signed will enable Ubisoft to accelerate its development in China in the coming years and fully leverage a market with great potential. Today, Ubisoft is fully reaping the benefits of our long-term strategy and the successful transformation towards a more reoccurring, profitable business. Ubisoft is perfectly positioned to capture the numerous video game growth drivers in the coming years. We're focused more than ever on delivering on our strategic plan. So a lot of mumbo jumbo for many of you, but the big news is that they have partnered with Tencent to help buy out some stuff, and Tencent, that partnership with Tencent, deals with just getting Ubisoft into China. It doesn't necessarily deal with what Ubisoft's going to make, so they don't have that kind of control. So you don't have to worry about Tencent being like, hey, Ubisoft, you need to make this. It's like, no, they're just going to help get Ubisoft games penetrated into China. But yeah, this is very, very good news. In general, Ubisoft is basically going to stay as we've always known, and, well, at least I've loved it over the years. I know they're not perfect, and they make mistakes, and they've done some bad things, but overall, I always liked their direction over the past 5 or so years, and I hope this continues. And I hope it continues in the form of Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle number 2. I would love to see a sequel, along with Assassin's Creed and other games coming to Switch one day. This makes this far more likely than it would have been if Vivendi had completed the buyout that they have been attempting to pull off for quite some time. Whew! Ubisoft, man. You avoided the bullet on that one. The next story. This is actually maybe the biggest story of today. It's a story that broke late last night. The Switch may indeed be getting a revision eventually that will have at least 8 gigabytes of RAM with a new PCB. Now, this comes from a known Switch hacker named Mike Heskin. He deep dived into version 5.0.0, and we previously mentioned that this version contains a new SoC, which was something that Nintendo would be implementing to kind of push back on hackers, right? Because people were hacking it at the hardware level, so it wouldn't even matter what version the software was at because you would hack the hardware. Well, this version mentioned that there will be new versions of the hardware in the future, like new motherboards and all that stuff, a new chip even that would make it much harder to hack at that level. This is actually a very common way that hackers are combated at the hardware level, by releasing many different versions of the hardware, so there's no one way to hack the hardware. Now, that being said, after diving even deeper into 5.0.0, the update includes specific support for 8 gigabytes of RAM. And obviously new PCB, new SoC, which was previously mentioned. Now, when you combine this all together, it's important to note that just because it includes support for 8 gigabytes of RAM doesn't mean that 8 gigabytes of RAM is coming to the consumer level right now. What this could mean is that soon, if not already, an 8 gigabyte RAM version of Switch could have been sent off to developers. And there are reasons sometimes for developers to have systems that have more RAM than at retail for development purposes. However, typically when something like this happens, it can indicate that there will be a future retail version that also supports such hardware. Otherwise, these firmware options wouldn't be there at the consumer level. So it is highly likely that an 8 gigabyte RAM version of Switch will be going to developers soon if they don't already have it and now have the ability to use it. And it could indicate that a future Switch, whether it's a new Nintendo Switch, Switch XL, Switch 2, or whatever they want to call it, could potentially double the RAM of the current Nintendo Switch, which is at 4 gigabytes. Now, if you combine this with the new SoC and the new PCB and the new T214, which is what it references in terms of names of the new chip. It is possible that this all could really be in reference, and this is just speculation on my part, so separate this from what the hacker said. I'm speculating that this could be that the T214 is actually the X2, and Nintendo is combining the X2 with 8 gigabytes of RAM for a new version of Switch to release next year. Now remember, I'm saying next year because Nintendo has already confirmed that this year there will not be a new version of Switch coming out at the consumer level because they are focused on the current Switch. They're focused on expanding the lineup and expanding the audience and probably keeping up with demand and all that stuff. They have no reason to necessarily have to release a new one, but Nintendo also knows that phones are starting to catch up a little bit. Next year, even phones might start to surpass Switch potentially. And then you also have to look at things like PlayStation 5 announcements and Xbox 2 or whatever the case happens down the line. Nintendo has to kind of sort of prepare for that stuff and not let the Switch feel like an older piece of tech. Because what could kill Switch is when you expand the audience of people that have smartphones. If Switch starts feeling like less than their smartphone they're using in their pocket, they'll have less and less reason to use it. Now, again, this is speculation on my part. The 8 gigabyte of RAM is factually in the firmware, but the speculation that Tegra X2 could be what the T214 is completely speculation on my part. That's maybe even hopefulness on my part. I don't know, but this is big, big news because even just doubling of the RAM is big news in that of itself. Even if they stick with the Tegra X1, that gives them a lot more cash and a lot more, just a lot more freedom to do certain things they might not be able to do currently with just 4 gigabytes. So, yeah, and 8 gigabytes is kind of the standard as well for PC gaming. I know some PC games are starting to use more than 8 gigs, but 8 gigs is still pretty standard to play at medium settings in 1080p. So this is really, really good news that this could even be considered. And if RAM prices are getting to a more affordable level, they could potentially release this without even increasing the price of the Switch past $300 next year. So that would be something to look forward to, I believe, in 2019. So, yeah, that's great news. Again, we don't know if any of this is going to come to be. We don't know if just because the support is in there, developers are even going to get 8 gigabyte kits. But why include the support if they're not making a plan to do something with it, right? Anyways, I'm going to move on to 2 more stories that are in the other news section. One of them is that we have some early releases of the MPD, and this just tells us some weird numbers because the person who leaked these MPDs has leaked them in the past and gotten them correct, and I'm going to assume the numbers they're referencing are in the millions because otherwise they don't make any sense to me, and that is that PlayStation 4 was actually the #1 selling system in February in the MPD with 1.3 million units sold, while Xbox One was number 2 at 1.11 million units sold. But don't worry, folks, Switch was up there as well with over 1 million units sold. The SNES Classic sold 490,000 roughly. It's a combination of other factors, SNES Classic being the biggest one, and then the 3DS moved 370,000 units. And that comes from a known MPD leaker, as I said. The best-selling software in February was Monster Hunter World, which it would explain the massive peak in PlayStation 4 and Xbox One sales, and then it was followed up by Mario Kart 8 and Odyssey. So yeah, there is that. That's, again, he doesn't actually say million, he just goes 1.3, 1.11, and 1, so I'm just assuming it's in the millions. It is what it is. We'll know for sure soon, but that at least gives us an idea. I think it's expected for PlayStation 4 to be #1 because Monster Hunter World has blown up that much. That being said, one story I want to make sure we get to before we sign out today deals with Smash Bros. It's not really a story per se. It's more of an update. Phil Spencer has been vocal in the past. Yes, that Phil Spencer, who runs the Xbox division and now is a higher up in the company, has talked in the past about wanting Banjo and Kazooie in Smash Bros. If you guys listen to our podcast or listen to it this week, you'll know that that's also one of our most desired characters to appear in Smash Bros. And it turns out that Banjo and Kazooie still has Phil Spencer's approval to be in Smash. He was re-asked about if he would like to see Banjo-Kazooie in Smash, and he just said simply, yes. Phil Spencer has been pushing for Banjo-Kazooie to appear in Smash for many, many years, and it hasn't happened yet, and it probably won't happen unless they can come to an agreement to re-release Banjo-Kazooie on the eShop. But whatever the case may be, we've never seen a Western character added to Smash. It's always been Japanese third-party characters, so we'll just have to see what happens. But I'm glad to see that Phil Spencer still is in massive massive support of including a IP they realize is important to Nintendo fans, include that character in the roster. I personally would like to see it. I'm sure many of you would as well. I also would love to see Conquer added, but you know what? It is what it is. It's not really in Microsoft's hands. It sounds like they're all for it, so it's really up to Nintendo. So Nintendo, I'm talking to you right now, and I know you don't listen to this, but I don't care. I'm going to just pretend you do in this moment. Sakurai, Nintendo, make Banjo and Kazooie happen. You are the only ones preventing it from becoming a thing. Anyways, folks, I am Nathaniel Rufflegents from Nintendo Prime, and if you like this video, you know what to do, and if you dislike the video, hit that dislike button. Otherwise, subscribe for more content, and I will catch you in the next one.